Good morning, all. My name is Gillian Palmer, and I'm the owner of the Finance Hub and also a company called Lending Made Simple. I'd like to thank Smarter Society this morning for asking me to come along. But this is the first time I've actually ever spoken at a webinar. So um, I just seen a message coming in there. Yeah, so just bear with me, but I'm going to get going. So just to give you a little bit of background on who I am and what I've done in my past, because it kind of paints a picture as we go through the presentation today as to, my experience of business and kind of how I've worked my way through health checks of my own businesses along the way. So I've been about 25 years in business. I started off my career in photocopiers. So I worked for Xerox in London. I then was given an opportunity to open a Xerox dealership in Dublin, which is actually where I'm from. So I packed my bags, sold my house, went home. Didn't really know an awful lot about running a business, but I knew how to sell photocopiers. And I started, like most people, doing what I'm very good at. But actually, not understanding the full background on, and responsibility that you take as well when you're running a business. So, hey ho, 1st of January 2000, I started this business up. And it grew quite rapidly, and I had to take staff on quite rapidly. And one of the things or tips that I took from actually my brother at the time, and I will talk about this later when we go on to the financial um health checks and always analysing your business, was to really learn about the finances in your business. And I do find, certainly with a lot of my clients who are, in all walks of life, all types of businesses, from, kind of tradespeople to manufacturing people to people in advisory positions, people in IT. So I do all sorts of businesses, and we start off our business understanding what we do. So I knew how to sell photocopies, but actually understanding the financials from day one, and even taking some guidance, whether that's from an accountant, maybe a business advisor. I even had a training course with, it was Sage at the time, and since then I use Zero now, and I had a training course with them. Because if you don't understand your business, you can start to make money. Your income will come in. You think this is amazing. You've got lots of, you're raising lots of invoices. But actually, if you don't understand all your costs of your business, your margins, it can really steer out of control. And as I deal with a lot of businesses that are growing, I see that happening. And that's why I was quite delighted today to be able to share this story of making sure that you constantly keep an eye on the financial health of your business. So sorry, back to me. So I built that business, and I built it to about a 3 million turnover in about 4 years. And then I had an opportunity to buy another business, which is about the same size. So I bought that business and we went to 6 million overnight. And believe me, I learned a lot. And when you try then integrate, and if any of you on here today are considering maybe acquisitions in the future, you really do need to make sure that the financials are dealt with. It's not just the purchase price of that business, it's how you're going to integrate it, and how you're going to deal with your eye being off the ball while you're integrating those businesses, and the financial costs as well. So I built it to about 7 million, and then I sold it. And since then I've bought and sold a few different businesses. However, 10 years ago, I fell into the finance industry. I was asked to become a sales director for a finance brokerage company. And I thought, well, I do like finance, and I do like looking at the finances of my business, but I actually don't know anything about finance. So I went and I learned about it. I took the job, I learned about it. But actually what I realized was my knowledge of business was more important than my lack of knowledge of what went on in a bank. And that's why I like to kind of tell the story, because You know, along the way, you learn so much. I'm still learning. I'm 25 years in business, and I'm still learning along the way. So, however, I didn't last very long with that company because I don't like working for other people, and I didn't like how they were treating people when it came to finance. You know, if any of you, oh, sorry, I've just been asked to change the slide. I'm not sure. Sorry, Jeff.
Hey, Gillian, and
Yeah.
sorry for the
Sorry.
sorry. I had a Zoom crash there, so jumped out there, and I think you jumped in there. You know, a really good introduction. I just wanted to just set the scene for all of the participants that are on, and then we'll jump back in there. And obviously, everyone's heard from Gillian, and I think this is going to be a really interesting one. And you know, particularly this year, I think is going to be a real challenge for lots of small businesses. I think you know, confidence is something that we're hearing a lot about in the news, or lack of. You know, whether it's in this country or in you know in other countries across the globe. And I think that you know the concerns around potential stagflation or recession is definitely in there. And I think, you know, number one is that, which I think Gillian's going to be able to talk through, is around finance. And that's why we're really delighted to have somebody of Gillian's caliber here. And she's explained, you know, just kind of how she's developed her business and so forth. I just wanted to introduce and make sure that everyone's aware. So this is part of the Accelerate program that's being delivered by the Kent and Medway Growth Hub. So if this is your first time interacting with the Growth Hub, then a very big welcome. The Growth Hub is effectively like your first foray into business support within the whole of Kent, and then also more broadly nationally. And it's a program which is funded by Kent County Council, and it just gives you access to any business support out there. So it's a really good way of being able to just find out and to get navigated towards all of the different business support opportunities across the county, and then also more broadly nationally. So just to let you know, we'll be putting out a survey. In there you can find out about how to get directed to other business support programs, you know, and how you can find out about the Growth Hub. And also as an opportunity to find out about some of the other programs that we're doing in terms of some of the funding programs which are run by Kent County Council, which are really important to do that. So, but we will have a Q&A session after. Anyone that's familiar with Zoom webinars, there is a Q&A button. You can pop up a question, and then we'll pick up and we'll do a Q&A session with Gillian at the end. We do also have the opportunity, if you want to have a separate session, which is a Zoom meeting, which is going to be a more in-depth opportunity to get some advice from Gillian, and kind of one-to-many mentoring sessions. So really exciting, and then really aside from that, I will now hand back to Gillian to crack on, and so if you have any questions, pop them in there. We will pick them up at the end. But other than that, over to you, Gillian.
Okay, thank you very much, Jeff. I'll try not to waffle too much. Before I actually go on to my presentation, though, I will talk just a little bit about what you were saying about the economy stagnating. I'm actually quite a positive person, and I will always see, you know, the positives and what's going on in the business world. And I think because I predominantly deal in business loans. I've seen a massive, I mean, literally, it's been like a roller coaster since lockdown, and I'm seeing a very positive upturn at the moment. So just to give you an idea of what that roller coaster looked like from a lending point of view, and I will at the end of the presentation talk about the types of alternative funding that is available at the moment. But the roller coaster started when the word lockdown kicked in, and literally every funder in the UK, I'd say within an hour, closed the doors. I was getting an email after email of them shutting their doors, not lending any money. Then we were lucky enough to get the bounce back, and I'm hoping everybody that's on here took advantage of that, because it was the best loan we will ever see in our lives, and the cheapest loan we will ever see in our lives. And then there was a group of different types of government-backed loans. So you might have remembered the CBILS loan, the RLS. We now have the GGS, which is the Growth Guarantee Scheme. So there's been one after the other since then. But the CBILS gave a real spike because everybody jumped on it and took it, because we were all scared. We didn't know what was happening with our businesses. After that, it took a massive downturn, because we then all had the money, but then the cost of business lending went up pretty high, and it's still pretty high. It's only starting to come down ever so slightly. But it stagnated again for another year. And what I seen last year, unfortunately, was either companies liquidating and just deciding, do you know what, I'm not going to make it through, or debt consolidation, which was where they had taken on too many loans, and the repayment of those loans, they could have been short term, and the repayment was killing their business, and they couldn't afford it. So we were looking to try reschedule that debt over a longer period to help them through the bumpy roads. But obviously, unfortunately, not everybody made it through. But what I'm seeing now is an upturn again. And I think if people are borrowing, it means they're borrowing because they're growing. And I think that's a positive. Um, the other thing that I'm seeing a hell of a lot of at the moment is acquisitions. And the reason for that is you've got, let's say, a older company or older person running a company who has, rode the wave for many years, of recessions, of COVID, and has just come to a stage where they feel, you know what, I can't do this anymore. And more than likely, they've probably not invested in the business in things like technology, because technology is moving so quick now. So their social media may not be good. They may not be able to take bookings for their clients as efficiently as their competitor. And it's the competitor that is actually buying them up. But that's what's happening at the moment. You've got, let's say, that young entrepreneur who's invested in the technology and the systems and the processes in their business. So in order to, buy this other business, they can just swallow that business in, take out some of the costs, but also take that loyal customer base on, and make their business, I suppose, bigger and better. So plus the lenders, all the lenders that shut their doors slowly opened up along the way. And now they're all absolutely open, they're lending, and at the end of this presentation, I will tell you about some of the very, very creative funding that's out there now, because we've all changed the way we do business. A lot of people sell online. They don't have an order to process from a big organization. They have to buy the stock and they sell online. So the way we do business has changed, and the alternative funding market now has really invested in that. Also with the use of fintechs, which is financial technology, they've invested in that. So they're way ahead of the banks in how they lend and the type of lending products that they offer. So I see a real positive upturn, I'm hoping, this year. But what I'm going to do, firstly, and the reason I've written this presentation the way I did, is to go through this financial health check and the type of things you should be doing. Then I'm going to talk about the type of things the lenders, if you want to grow your business and you want to borrow to grow that business, which really we all need to do at some stage, whether you start off with your own money. At some stage, if you want to grow, you will have to borrow money, whether that's because of acquisition, taking on more staff, buying more stock for orders, more machinery. You will have to, at some stage, borrow money in order to do that. So what I really want to talk about today is getting your business in the right, getting it ready for that approach to the finance companies. Because many years ago, you would go into the bank, your bank manager understood your business, but he didn't know anything about your personal situation. Nowadays, it's all connected. So your personal credit rating and your business credit rating is so the whole package is taken into consideration. So if you've got in mind that you want to expand in the future, you really need to be doing this health check and making sure that you're keeping an eye and putting the right processes. I'm just going to move this so I can see my screen because I can see the chat box. Okay. Vicky, this is not moving on for me. Here we go. Okay. So I think I spoke about this a little bit earlier. My path, I've had many years and in different businesses as well, won some awards. And I'm not going to go on about those. But I do have, this is my company, the Finance Hub in Tunbridge Wells, just opened in London where I'm sitting at the moment, and in Canterbury in the last month. Okay, so I'm going to start talking. Right. Okay. So why is it important to carry out these checks, and what sort of things should we really be looking at? And I talked a little bit earlier, if you were on from the start, about constantly analysing your business. So what I see with some organizations, said you start your business, you're very good at what you do. All of a sudden, you're after the hard grind, probably within the first year, you start to invoice your clients, you start to win more business. And your overheads are probably still a little bit low until you start investing, taking on staff, maybe premises, having to buy more stock, maybe cars, vans, equipment. And very quickly, the costs sometimes can outdo the income. Um, and a lot of people, may not, if you're not keeping a track of it as you go, you may get hit with that when you sit down with your accountant to do your year end, and all of a sudden, and this has happened to me in one of my companies, all of a sudden you've got a big, massive, 20 grand loss. And why have I got that? Because I've invoiced out 200,000, and I don't take that much money out of the business. But it all adds up. And it really does creep up on you along the way. So analysing and do involve people like, I mean, I would normally involve my accountant. You might even involve a business coach to help with this along the way, but certainly your accountant to help you look at the real cost within your business. Like, what is the cost of every acquisition, every deal, or whatever it is that you do with your client. Taking the full overheads of the business into account. So, you have your rent, you have the cost of your stock, you have the cost of your staff, you have your national insurance. You probably have rates if you've got an office that's big enough to have rates. And then the other elements, you've got your IT, you've got your phones, your mobile phones, your Wi-Fi. So they're all, it all adds up. And as I said, it's good to sit down at the very start and work all of these costs out and make sure that you have built that in to the overall cost of your business. Sorry, let me just. Struggling how to change the pages here. Okay. So these are the type of things your accountant will probably go through with you, which is to look at the real profitability of your business to make sure that you're maximizing it. So we talked about your set costs, so things like your Wi-Fi's and your the cost of your website, the cost of your staff. They're fixed costs. So really what you need to look at is, the bigger the income and the more sales, if that cost is fixed, then obviously your profit margins are going to increase. And this is where having a cash flow forecast on day one. And I remember looking at my cash flow forecast and thinking it was just, I couldn't understand it. I still look at my cash flow forecast and still think I don't understand it, because some of it you really you're making up at the start of the year because you're not really sure what it's going to be. But if you don't have a basis, then you've got to start somewhere. But I think it's good to analyze that. And certainly in my business, that's one of the things I learned from a very early stage, is analyzing absolutely every single month where that cash flow forecast is. Did your sales go up? Did your costs go up? Your costs may go up, but they may not go up as quick as your sales go up, and that's where your profit margins really kick in. And that's really down to the budgeting of the company and setting the targets, because it is very, very easy. And I know, as you try to advertise your business, you spend more money maybe in paper advertisement, online advertisement. People are, knocking down your door all the time trying to sell you something that's going to help you grow your business. And it's very easy to go, oh yeah, we'll do this, we'll do that. And that's what eats into your profits very, very quickly. So I think being shrewd about planning and forecasting well in advance, so that you know that impact. If you add that extra £1,000 cost, let's say, every month onto your business, what's the impact of that? And actually, I went through an exercise in the last week where I've just reinvesting in SEO, so my social media, and the SEO to increase the footprint of my business and where I get business. So hence, the new offices in London and Canterbury. And very quickly that cost is going to go up. So I've had to sit back and say, right, how quick is that going to give me a return on my investment? I understand if I'm part of a networking group, I understand that's going to cost me, let's say, £100 a month. I'll analyze how many referrals I get from it and what's the return on that investment. Things like SEO, social media, sometimes it's not that easy or you don't get an instant return. So I think that's where it's very good to stick with your parameters of your budgeting from the start of the year, to make sure that those costs don't actually get out of control. And I do believe kind of on a quarterly basis, you should be meeting with your accountant to make sure you're keeping on top of that. Your accountant may talk to you about liquidity and solvency, and this effectively is that there's more money in the business than so the income of the business is obviously bigger than the outgoings of the business. So if, for instance, you have a loss in your first few years, which most of us probably do, it's managing that liquidity, because there will be a stage in a business, if there's losses for, probably 3, 4, 5, going on to 6 years, then really, that business is insolvent. And if you are going to look for funding in the future, the solvency of the business will be taken into consideration. So budgeting and making sure that you get that, you try to keep your business in a solvent position, is ideal. The type of things that you would look at as part of that is your accounts receivable. So that is your money that is due into you. What cash you've got in the bank, and what debt you've got in the business. Excuse me. Compared to the liquidity in the business. Operational effects. So it's cost control. I think we talked a little bit about budgeting, but really controlling those costs as you go along. And also analyzing those potential risks. Take, for instance, are all your eggs in one basket? Have you have you got an even split in who your client is? So I'll just give you an idea of one of my clients who's in the event space. Now, event space took a very, very big hit. In fact, just closed down that industry in lockdown. This company picked it up very quick and won a lot of contracts in the car industry, so the likes of Aston Martin, Hyundai, and did it very well, and therefore these companies were banging on their door to do more business. Now, they could have sat there and thought, yeah, we'll just take this. We're good in the motor industry. But you never know. Something happens in the motor industry. I think the motor industry is having a bit of a hit itself at the moment. So, looking at those risks and making sure that you spread your risks into different industries. So they're now gone into um, designer goods. One of their clients now is Coca-Cola. So yeah, they've spread their risk across lots of different industries, and I think that's really, really important. I know in my business and my lending business, as the business has grown, I'm getting bigger clients, but we still get clients who are only 3 months in business, turning over £50,000, and we'll still treat them the same as my biggest client at the moment is turning over 15 million. So I think having a good spread of clients in your business to make sure that you're not leaving yourself out on a limb. And it is very, very easy to do. I've had clients who have almost gone bust because they supply into B&Q, and they got a massive big order. All their cash went on buying the raw materials to service that order. And B&Q decided not to deal with them anymore and wouldn't pay them for 60 days. So this person, business and person, nearly went bankrupt. We were able to get them a UK export loan to help them through it. But we had to make sure that the business was going to be solvent. And at that stage, we actually brought in an insolvency practitioner. And I know, I'm not sure if anybody's ever spoke to an insolvency practitioner, but I always felt it was doomsday when you did, but it's not always doomsday. And that's why I think as part of that financial health check, it's always worth keeping an eye out. And is your business solvent? And is it worth speaking to a specialist like that to see if the company is better off closing down? Or are you going to survive? But what you don't want to do is borrow way too much money for that survival, and put your life and your family at that risk as well. And that's why using kind of experts is very, very important. Okay, debt management strategies. Okay, let's move on to your next. Okay, so I thought I would just do a slide to kind of put that into layman's term, because some of those words can be a little bit scary. In fact, they're still scary to me, and really they're the type of things you go through with your accountant. So I thought I'd put it into more layman's terms. How are we doing for time? Oh, lots of time. So really, how much is the company bringing in every month, and what are those running costs? Analyzing and managing those costs on a regular basis to make sure that your costs aren't running away with all of your profits effectively. Analyzing, one of the things I do on my business on a regular basis, in fact, sometimes I do it even weekly, is I use Zero in my business, and I'm not sure the audience and what level your business is. But Zero is an amazing tool for being able to analyze your P&L. Literally at the push of a button, you can bring up your P&L and see if you're profitable. Now, it's not always up to date, but one of the tools, or one of the things I do in my business, is I've got multiple streams of income. So I charge a membership fee. I make a commission. I sometimes rent out my event space. So all of those different areas within Zero, I give them a different code. So at any one time, and normally on a monthly basis anyhow, I analyze where I'm making my money. So, am I making it on the event space? Am I making it on commission? Am I making it on membership? So therefore I can say, well, you know what, I'm making more money in this area, so why don't we focus more of the time and attention and resources into doing more of what we do really well? And I think that's the key is the analytics. And going back to what I said earlier, we're all a master at something. I was great at photocopiers. I'm now good at finance. That doesn't make me a good business owner. Um, it doesn't teach me how to run a set of accounts. But I do think for every business, and at the time I went into business, my first business with my brother, and he made me go and do a training course on how to use Sage and how to understand a profit and loss and what does it mean. Because when I speak with all of my clients who are generally entrepreneurs who are starting to do really well and want to really expand, and I say, um, is your business profitable? And quite a lot of the times I get quite a vacant look. So they know they can make money, they know they're good at what they do, but sometimes I'll run away from actually, I'm not really sure. I don't know if it makes profit. I just know how to make money. But it's really important to sit down and learn these things because that can be, in my experience, the difference in you being successful and the business not making it. And statistics years ago was always at 2 years. So a lot of our funders would only lend to 2 years plus companies, because that was the stage when people would either fall or they wouldn't. Although that has started to slide towards 3 years. I think probably since lockdown, that's kind of changed how we do business and we analyze it over a longer period. When you get to a certain size is normally when you would start to bring in a management team to do all that, which is a nice place to be and nice to have somebody else doing the analytics for you. But I can't emphasize more how much analyzing that business on a regular basis instead of just running, selling, analyzing the costs. The other part of managing the costs is at what stage do you start to take on that extra staff? Because that extra staff is probably going to help you to take your business to the next level. However, that's going to cost you, I would always estimate, at least 3 months before you see a return on it. So you've got to build in that you're going to have to invest to make that expansion and to take the business to the next level. And that's the real risky bit because you can invest in that and it mightn't work out and you're in trouble. So hence back to my managing your costs as you grow and making those decisions, based on your analyzing how you believe you could grow that business, and the cost associated to that growth. And as you grow, that is have you got the ability to meet that short term? So if it's going to take that 3 or maybe even 6 months, have you got something in place to make sure that you can cover that cash flow in in that short term? And normally what I see is that people don't think about that in advance. They know they're doing something good. They've won a new contract. They go out there and they take on staff. They take on a bigger offers. And then, next month, the income hasn't grown at the rate the costs have grown. And there's no cash flow. And that's when panic kicks in and the wrong type of finance is taken because maybe they go online and just draw down a very, very quick, expensive loan. So preparing in advance for that growth is very important. And then the other one I did speak about earlier was managing the most profitable streams of income in your business and doing more of it. Look at what you're good at and do more of that, and what's not making you money and do less of it. Many years ago, when I analysed Lender Made Simple at the end of a year, I always do a big, analyse the whole year. How did it go? And I was doing business loans and I was doing commercial mortgages at the time. And I knew I wasn't very good at commercial mortgages. But when I analysed my conversion rate, so I looked at how many sales or how many loans applications I got in and how many of them I converted. Now, when I looked, I was 70% conversion, which was very, very high in my industry. The average is about 35. So that made me realize, well, I'm very good at that. But when I looked at the commercial mortgages, we had converted 1%. And I think that told me straight away, we need to get rid of that. That is, let's outsource that to somebody who does it better. And I do think since lockdown, we are better at doing that. We're better at saying, "Do you know what? My mate across the road, he's better at doing that than I actually am. So let's just give that to him and maybe he'll pay me a commission on it." So I'm getting something back into the business without it actually costing me. When I analysed that, that there was, I had one person that was working on processing them commercial mortgages, and I really wasn't making the income. So I was able to cut the cost out of the business and focus on putting more energy into what I was actually doing best. So I hope I'm not repeating myself on any of this. Okay, so what is the benefit of actually, so just going back over the benefit of carrying, sorry, the group chat is taking over my screen. Technical difficulty here of the group chat on there. I'm going to move that over here. Okay. Right. So what is the benefit of actually detecting issues at a very early stage? So identifying the potential financial problems before they actually become critical. So I talked about where, you've won a big order, you've taken on more staff, you start to process that order or that service, whatever it is that you do, but you still haven't been able to invoice the client for that job until the job is actually complete. And this is where I see businesses falling over unless they catch that at a very early stage. Because what tends to happen if you're very good at what you do, more people come to you and more people come to you. So it's almost like you're running before you can walk. And we all get very excited when we get more orders and more people want to do business with us. And that's why, one, not only carrying out a financial check, but actually the analytics and the budgeting at the start. And it's normally if people don't do that and they get into that critical position, that's where we've seen, even in construction, some huge organizations falling over because they just are refused to see it, analyze it, bring in experts to look at it at an early stage, and it becomes to a critical stage. And unfortunately, sometimes you can't bring it back. Improve your decision making. So provide data to make informed decisions about investment, which I spoke about. Before you make that investment, before you take on the staff or the offices or warehouses or stock, make sure that your business is as lean as possible, and really, I talked about taking staff on, which is always a big cost in the business, and it's a scary thing to do because you're scared if you take that person on, that if you don't keep winning business, you're not going to be able to, as I call it, feed all those mouths. And that's why it's really important. I always, in my experience, make sure that I'm literally at bursting point in my business with the staff I've got before I go to take the next one on. Because as a business owner, it's your responsibility, and I say feeding mouths, I feel it's not only me, it's my staff, it's their families, and you've got to make sure that as a business owner you take that's a big responsibility, because it can't be their fault if you can't pay the bills. So making sure that all those overheads are as tight as possible before you move into that expansion. Accessibility to funds. So the healthiness, and as I said, planning and for your cash flow, for your costs, for your margins is all very important. But when you go to secure some lending for that growth within the business, the funder's going to look at they're not going to look at your cash flow forecast. Some of them do, the high street bank will, the private bank will, but they're really, looking at businesses kind of 5 million, 10 million turnover. Probably most of us on here, I imagine, we're not sitting in that bracket. So the funders that are going to lend to us type of people are going to be looking at things like credit ratings. So they're not necessarily going to ask you for that forecast and to make sure that you're running the business properly. They're going to look more at the history of your business. So things like your accounts and lodging your accounts and making sure your confirmation statement's up to date. So everything like that is very, very clean, because that all affects the credit rating and the credibility of your business. You're paying your creditors, and you're certainly not having any defaults. That is absolute no when it comes to securing any lending for the growth of your business. Now, accessing funds, when I talked about profitability, and some businesses don't show profitability for the first few years, and there are lenders that will take that into consideration. However, I also do come across a lot of businesses who don't want to show profits and do their best not to show profits, because we're all trying to be as tax efficient as we possibly can. However, quite a lot of the funders will want to see profitability, and not huge profitability, just that it is in the black and not in the red. So if there is a chance that you can keep your business in that healthy position, in a profitable position, which means there's not a minus number on the bottom of your P&L and balance sheet, or more your P&L, that will absolutely go in your favor when you come to looking to secure some sort of financial facility to grow that business. I talked also about your personal credit rating, and now, because all this information is so easily accessed, you do really need to work on your personal credit rating, as well as the business, if you want to secure some funding to grow. And just to give you a few tips on the personal credit rating, most of the funders will use Experian. So there's a free app called Experian Credit Score app, which most of you might know of. There's another one called Credit Karma. So they will be looking on Experian for you to be kind of certainly above around a 750 out of the 999. Credit Karma, I think 720 is their highest, or 700 is their highest. They will want you around the kind of 550 or 520 upwards. So do download those two apps and keep an eye on them, because they do change. Even I keep an eye on mine, and mine changes. One of the biggest things that will affect that personal credit rating is obviously defaults, which is absolute no. So defaulting on a mortgage, a car loan, your insurances, anything like that. If you get a default, you will be at least 3 to 6 months before any lender will actually look at you. CCJ, which there seems to be a lot more of those bouncing around these days. By monitoring your credit rating, and as I said, it's a free service, so do monitor it, you will find, if a CCJ, which is a county court judgment, is put on you, that will come up. So I have a client at the moment who has just won a big deal. He's grown his business. He needs a business loan. When he checked his credit rating, he had a CCJ for a parking fine that had gone to an old address, and he didn't know he had it. Now, if he had the app, he would have been able to see that. I, in my business as well, use a system called Credit Safe, which pulls in information from all sources, like Companies House, and so any company that comes to me and I check them out on that, they're on my system, and if they get a CCJ or change in their business that negatively affects their credit rating, I get a report every day, and I let them know, because I know they'll be coming to me for funding in the future, and I need to make sure that that business credit rating is as high as possible if they want to get funds in the future. So again, on the business side, CCJs are a big no-no. HMRC have been passing out loads of these at the moment. So do keep an eye on that, because even if it's only a £250, a lot of these funders nowadays have a lot of algorithms built in. So it would just be computer says no when it comes to that. So do keep an eye on your business credit rating, no CCJs, no defaults. And I always say to my clients, if you feel you've got to pay the wages on Friday and the money it's just not in the bank, don't default. There's always some sort of a quick credit line or something out there that you can get. It might cost you a bit of money, but actually in the long run, it's better for you to do that. And hence going back to why detecting issues early, analysing your cash flow early, so you can forecast that. And it's especially important. Like, I have quite a lot of my clients that have peaks and troughs in their year. So I have a client who sells golfing equipment, and December, because people are buying golfing equipment presents, and March, because people are going back out on the golf course for those fair weather golfers. So he already 3 months in advance of December, he already knows he's going to have a cash flow issue, because he knows he's got to buy a certain amount of stock to have it on the shelves to sell. So the prep of that is why prepping in advance is so important. What's next? Advanced financial stability, how to proactively manage risks and mitigate financial vulnerabilities. So I think we've probably gone over that with analysing the business and the cash flow forecasts. So just some hints and tips that I have learned along the way. I think most of you probably heard this saying that turnover is for vanity. And I talked earlier about, yeah, you can have loads of turnover. And, I get people coming to me at, 2-3 years in business, and they're making loads of money, and all of a sudden they want to buy a really flash car. And I'm saying, whoa, hold on, because it's going to hit you at some stage. These costs are going to hit you because you've expanded at the rate you've expanded. Profit is what keeps you sane, but the cash is king. And that is the one that could close the doors if you don't have the money in the bank to pay those suppliers, to pay your staff, to pay your overheads. Optimizing your credit rating, we talked about that both personally and business. And I'm more than happy to share afterwards. I have a chat with anybody and give them, or even if they want a report on their credit rating, I'm more than happy to pull one of those for you. HMRC, this is your number one creditor. In fact, they changed the laws last year. I think it was probably the year before now. Yeah, I think it was 23. That on liquidated companies, HMRC is the number one creditor. So that means if your business goes bust and you go into liquidation, the people that you owe money to get a spread when the liquidator collects any money that's due to you, or the money they can get in for you. It normally gets spread evenly across all the creditors that's owed money. However, the laws were changed in, as I said, I think it was 2023 now, where HMRC is number one. So when the liquidator brings the money in, HMRC gets paid first, then the rest gets paid. So the Crown, I think what you've got to think of it is the Crown, you're collecting that money on behalf of the Crown. So if you're charging £100, £20 of that, or £100 plus your VAT of £20, that belongs to HMRC. And 9 times out of 10, a lot of the lending I do, people come to, I need to pay my taxes, my corporation tax, my VAT, even the NIC. Obviously, we're all getting hit with higher NIC now. That belongs to them. So if you can, and it's very hard, I find it very hard, have a separate bank account and put that 20% away. so that you have it there available. Now, a lot of people do, when they owe HMRC money, they do a deal with them. And because HMRC don't charge a lot of interest on it. So I think some people use it as a bit of a cheaper way of borrowing, because they'll do a deal with HMRC to spread what they owe them over a longer period. However, if you're going to look to get a business loan or any sort of business facility, this will be taken into consideration, and it's not always favoured. So I'll normally say to people, if you're looking to grow the business, you are going to take out a loan to do it, but you also know you've got your corporation tax coming up, or you've got a big VAT bill coming up. Why not borrow that at the same time, and keep them all happy, keep HMRC happy, and have the cash in the bank to do that. Filing your accounts. So you have 10 months after your year end to file your accounts. So my year end is 31st December every year, and I have until October to file those accounts. Now, if you're looking for funding, and if you've had a really good year and it's profitable, there's no need to wait until the end of 10 years. I would say get them in early. If what a funder's looking at, what an underwriter is thinking, if you leave that to the last minute and don't pay it until it's due, are you hiding something? This is how an underwriter is thinking when they're looking at your case. If you're confident enough that those accounts are really good, then get them filed as early as possible. I get my accountant already is looking at my account. We have my accounts nearly done for December last year. For me, I like to do it as well, because then I can prepare for my corporation tax. I know what's coming up. I know I'm going to have to make sure that that money is going to be in the bank. You can file your accounts now, and you don't have to pay until the 10th month the corporation tax. So it's not if you file it. In fact, my accountant advised me years ago, even though I like to file early, not to pay them, because sometimes they'll pay it back to you, and then you might forget they paid it back to you, and it gets all complicated. But it shows that you're quite confident about your business if you're lodging your accounts earlier than the deadline, which some people do, and then they go over the deadline, and that's when the CCJs kick in. Improving your cash flow by collecting your money quicker. So this can be key, and I've seen some people very, very clever with this, and having very successful businesses. So either you look at your contracts and you change your collection days from 30 days from invoice to maybe 15 days. If you can with your clients, you may incentivize your clients that if they pay you earlier, that you will give them a little bit of a discount, because this helps you get cash into your business quicker. I also recently funded a company. It was the events company I spoke about earlier that have grown unbelievably in the last few years. And I got them a cash flow, like a line of credit, which was costing them 1.5% a month. So what this line of credit was it would pay their creditor invoices and give them 150 days to pay it back. Now, they originally had 60 days to pay that creditor invoice. Then my lender would pay it and give them another 150 days. However, what they did, because that was only 1.5% per month, they went back to their creditor and said, if you give me a 10% discount, I'll pay you up front. So they paid up front using my funder at 1.5% a month. And they generally get paid within about 3 months. So it's cost them 4.5, let's say even they got paid in 4 months is 6%, and they've got a 10% discount. So actually that client made a profit on borrowing money. So there are very clever ways about it, but collecting that money quicker and having good processes in place with your collections people or team. Sorry, I wasn't aware there was a fire alarm check. I'm hoping it's just a fire alarm check. But yeah, looking at your contracts, your collection process, might be something that you discuss with your accountant as well, and how you collect the money, and also how your contracts are written to try get that money in quicker. And also I find if you've got a really good relationship with your client, they really like working with you, and you're a much smaller business than they are, asking them would they mind actually paying a little bit earlier, and that can help. So you're not paying for the cost of borrowing if they pay you a little bit earlier. We talked about registering with Experian Credit Score app and Credit Karma app. Said that that's the name of the two of them. Please do download them. I think it's great to have them there for everybody in business or in personal. And another tip, this is mainly on the personal credit rating side. So if you're somebody that constantly has a 999 on your Experian Credit Score and you're very confident and chuffed about that, and all of a sudden, and mine got hit a few months ago, 10 points, and I was really quite shocked. But if you've got multiple credit cards, so let's say you've got 5 credit cards, and all in all, you've got a 10 grand credit limit, you need to keep that about below, kind of around about the 3,000 mark. Once you go above that, that's when your credit rating kicks down. It's not exactly a bad thing, but that's the rule of thumb, and that's why you will lose points on your credit rating. So do keep an eye on that. And you know, we all need credit cards in our lives and our business as well. So if you know you've got something coming up, you know, maybe you've got to buy a lot more stock, go to your credit card companies and see will they up your limit so that you still stay within that 30% budget of utilization of your credit facility. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about expansion and growth now that we've got our accounts all in order. We know what we're doing. We're profitable. We're liquid, and we know about our costs, and we're being cautious about our growth. What are reasons people grow their business and need to invest in their businesses? Well, winning new contracts. That is probably a big percentage of what clients come to me. You know, I've got businesses that deal with care in the home. So they provide carers to go into people's home, and they work with the NHS, the local council, and they generally don't get paid for 60 days. They're doing a very good job, and they just keep winning more contracts. And they're upfronting all of that cost. They're having to put more vans on the road, more staff on the road, more stock of all the supplies that those people use when they go into the home, and yet they cannot invoice to the end of the month, and they're not paid for 60 days. That is one of the biggest issues in most businesses, is actually how they handle that growth. We talked about taking on more staff, taking on new premises, purchasing more stock, acquiring more vans and machinery, which I think we've covered. And then the longer term, because I believe things like staff, I will go on to the next slide and talk about short-term and long-term investments in your business. But things like marketing, your CRM, your website, we talked about SEO, social media. And the Finance Hub is 3 years going now, and I had to have a whole new website done and a whole new SEO because it wasn't going to cope with the expansion of the business. A new CRM as well, which is breaking my heart because I've invested a lot of money in all of this so far, and now I'm having to reinvest only 3 years in, which we have to, you know, if you want to move forward, you have to do that. So I believe that marketing, CRM, this sort of investment in your business is a long-term investment. It's not a short-term. So if you're looking to fund that, I will always look at a long-term. I'll move on to the next slide to talk about that in a minute. And then acquisitions. And I talked earlier about acquiring businesses, and this is happening a lot. And a lot of my clients that tend to acquire businesses are normally around the £1 million to £2 million mark. So, you know, it's that person who's grown the business, they've done a great job. They're now what I call off the tools, and I'm not just meaning people in trade, but, you know, because I mentioned this to somebody yesterday and they went, yeah, but I'm not in the trades. And then I had dinner with an accountant last night, And she said, "Oh God, I wish I was off the tools." So off the tools means she's not doing her accountancy anymore. She's now running the business. So that's what I mean by off the tools. So they're generally starting to turn over probably 1 million. They've done a great job. They've now invested in proper processes and systems. They're possibly putting in a management team. So they now have a financial manager. They might have an operations manager. They might have a sales manager. Um, and they're kind of stepping outside the everyday run of the business and looking at the overall running of the business. They put the graft in to get the business to where it is. And now they're thinking, actually, the next step is, why don't we just buy another business to enable us to probably double in size overnight? And the benefits of acquiring, let's say I talked earlier about acquiring an older business that probably hasn't invested in those websites, CRM, SEO, the processes, the marketing, the strategy, even down to kind of new technology, maybe, electric vehicles and, so the overall running of the business. And by acquiring that older type of business, they can probably take on a bigger amount of clients, take on double their client base overnight, but possibly then remove, well, they're certainly going to remove the owner who was probably taking quite a lot of money out of the business and integrate their financial systems, so they may be able to cut costs. So the economy of scale, and this is where the margin grows, because if you cut out all that sort of cost that's not needed because you already have it in your existing business, that's when you start to really make money. And that's why acquisitions is very, very important. I actually ran an event about acquisitions, and I will be running one. If you'd like to attend, keep an eye on the Finance Hub website. We'll have a date in the next few days, where we talk about acquisitions. What are you actually buying? Are you buying the base from somebody? So the accountant that is speaking at it, she has already bought 6 accountancy practices. She didn't want to buy a limited company. She didn't want all the costs of the business. She only wanted the base. That's all she wanted, was the earnings. Are you buying the limited company? Are you buying the assets? Are you buying the goodwill? So there's a hell of a lot, and you really need to make sure you've got the right team. So that's why I bring in the accountant to talk about that. Then you move into your legals, making sure that your contract is sealed tight, that your solicitor has looked at every element and you know what you're buying, because I've seen it where I've funded acquisitions and then a bag of worms comes out from what they bought, and destroys the business. So acquisitions is certainly, I think, the hot topic of this year as a form of growth within your business. So when it comes to funding that growth of your business, I break it down into 2 main elements, really: the short-term investment and the long-term. So the short-term being your cash flow, your monthly overheads, so your rent, your rates, your staff, your phone bills, all those, your website, all those costs that come in, and they're going to come in on a regular basis, is the short-term facility. So if that is the area of your business that you have an issue, then there's lots of different products that we can look at to fund that short term. So just to give you a few headings there, we've got revolving cash flow facility, which is my number one because I love it. It's because you only pay for it when you use it. And I call it your help you to sleep at night fund. Because it's there, it's not costing you if you don't use it. But you know it's there, and it gives you that ability. And I always feel anybody that I've put this facility with, it helps them to go out and win more contracts because they know the money's there. So they're not paying for it, but they know it's there, that if they take that, win those contracts, take the extra staff on, that they know that there's a cash flow there when it comes to payday, that they can pay, they can draw down on if they need it, and if they don't, it's not going to cost them. Invoice finance, or you may know of it as factoring, which probably had a very, very bad name to most people. out there. And I think the reason being it probably was used in the wrong situation, or it was there wasn't really many other options years ago, so everybody used invoice finance, and a lot of companies that got into using invoice finance couldn't get back out of it. So for those of you who don't know what invoice finance is, it's effectively where the lender will take your whole debtor book and they will lend you a percentage. It's generally around 80% of your debtor book. So every time you raise an invoice, you can draw down 80% of that from the funder. If it's used in the right instance, it's an amazing fund. So when I had my photocopier business, I had quite a large percentage of my turnover was for service contracts. And I had to put vans on the road, engineers on the road, toner, parts, and I couldn't invoice until the end of a quarter until I knew how many pages people had done on those photocopiers. And then they didn't pay me for 60, 90 days sometimes. So I was 5 to 6 months of my costs without me collecting that money. So I couldn't have run that business without invoice finance. So every time I raised those invoices, I was able to draw down 80% of that amount of money, which helped me to run the business and the general overheads, the staff, the rent, the rates, the everything. So in the right instance, it is a very good fund. Selective invoice discounting. This one I do more of in this day and age. And selective discounting is where you choose just one invoice or one debtor that you want to borrow against. So rather than taking your whole finance book or your whole debtor book and borrowing 80% of it, and where you may have some of your clients that pay really quickly, so you don't want to add them into that. Or you may have won a specific contract that you know you're not going to be able to fund without having some money in the bank. And with the use of fintech, there's some really excellent systems now. So I have one of my lenders who will attach themselves to your Xero or QuickBooks accounts. When you raise that invoice, there's a button that says, I want to fund it. When you select that button, it tells you the cost because it already knows who that debtor is, what the credit rating is, how long they take to pay. And that will tell you there and then that will be 3%, 4%, could be 10% if they're a bad payer. And you decide, yeah, I want to finance that. You press go, and within a couple of hours, you have that money in your bank account. So if it's 5%, you have 95% in your bank account, and then the funder collects the money. So for those people winning contracts, and I'll give you an example of one of my clients who used this. They're a marquee company, and they predominantly own the marquees, and they predominantly rent them for private weddings. So they get paid up front. So there's no risk there because they already own the tents. But they start winning bigger contracts that were about kind of 60,000, 70,000 pounds contracts with facilities management companies to go in and put the tents in, but put in staff and food and drinks and booze and all of that. And they just didn't have the cash flow. So every time they raise it, those invoices, they borrow against them. So it's excellent to cover kind of or going after that, allow them to go after those bigger deals that they normally wouldn't have. So very, very flexible. Credit lines or line of credit, this comes in many formats and is getting better with the use of fintech. So this can either be just a facility. I mentioned earlier about not defaulting on your business because you've got your rent to pay on Friday or you've got your wages to pay, so you're defaulting on something else, HMRC or something like that. A line of credit is generally a very quick fund that you can draw down, generally inexpensive, but there are facilities that don't cost you to set it up. Interest rate be expensive, but very flexible. So if you only use that money for 7 days and you pay it all back, you only pay interest when you use it. So that's why I'm saying talking to a broker and actually getting the right solution instead of panicking and going online and getting something off the internet that's extortionate, and making sure you get the right product to fit with what you're trying to achieve in your business. And trade finance. So trade finance is had disappeared for many, many years because of lockdown, but it's come back in. And trade finance is effectively financing your purchase, your credit or invoice. So if you're somebody that brings in stock from China and it takes 3 months to get here, then you sell it and you don't get paid for a month or two, trade finance will pay your credit or invoice in China or wherever it is all over the world, will pay that and then allow you, there's lots of different ways of paying it back. Some of them will allow you to spread it over 3, 6, 9 months. Some of them you won't have to pay until your product lands and you've sold it and you pay it back. So there's lots of different products coming to the market there. Long-term facilities. So we talked about marketing, websites. You might take on new premises, and if you're anything like me and double the amount of money you were going to spend on your premises, then you started off. Buying equipment, you might have, photocopiers, computers, laptops, iPads, any sort of assets like that. I would normally suggest a long-term facility. Now, that can be done in different ways. It could be a business loan or some asset finance, or a mixture of both. Sometimes if people come to me and say, look, I'm opening an office, we've got physical hard assets like I had when I opened my office, where I had glass offices, I had computers, I had fridges, photocopiers, iPads. They're the physical assets. But then there was a lot of money that needed to be spent on the flooring and the walls and stuff that you can't actually put on an asset finance, and the cost of doing all that work. So sometimes it's worth just putting it all together and putting it on a longer facility, or take the assets and put them on something like a hire purchase, where you can actually get all your VAT straight back and put a bit more money back into the business. So there's many, many different ways, but the logic behind how I think is, if it's something that's long term in your business, then you should spread it. People come to me, they've no cash in their business because they've just used their money to buy a van. I'm like, but you're going to be using that van over the next 3 or 5 years. Well, why didn't you spread the cost over 3 or 5 years and keep that cash for your cash flow? Commercial mortgages, buying the building that you're actually in, if you're at that stage. That photocopy business I had for 10 years, and I paid 45,000 rent every year. And when I sold that business, I nearly cried because I'd effectively paid for that building and I could have owned it. So if you are renting an office, you know, do speak to your accountant, because there's a much more tax efficient way if you were to buy that office and then you rent it back to yourself. Then you're the one ends up with the asset at the end of it. Okay, I think I went through most of these. How are we doing for time? So business loans generally go from 6 months to six years is kind of the max that most facilities will want. Rates are starting to come down a little bit. I mean, the lowest I've probably seen of late is about 8% per annum, up to probably around 20% per annum. So they're still quite high up there, and they don't tend to come down when the Bank of England comes down, unless we're looking at a high street bank, which don't lend a lot. What you've got to bear in mind with these funders is that they're privately funded. It could be institutional lending, but they need to make a margin. So it's not the Bank of England that's actually setting that rate. Revolving cash flow we talked about, overdraft facility. This comes in secured and unsecured. So unsecured, meaning you don't have to secure it against a physical asset. You will have to put a personal guarantee, and almost every lending that's out there now has personal guarantees on it. Or the secured. So that goes up to, I think now, 10 million in secured, where you have a property or multiple properties. The lender puts a charge on it and gives you an overdraft to use for whatever you need in your business, and whether that's to buy more property or pay for the overheads of your business, and your growth within the business. Invoice discounting and factoring we spoke about. Lending against stock, so the stock purchase of your business. Lending to pay your creditors, I think I went over earlier. Now, the lenders that lend to pay your creditors, and I just recently helped a client out who was winning contracts. It was for a sales service. It was in recruitment, but for selling sales service. And he was very, very good at it. He was turning £1 million after 2 years, and he wanted to go after blue chip businesses, and he wanted to charge them three different brackets: a 30 grand, a 50 grand, and 100,000. But he wanted them to pay up front because he could then reinvest in the business and take on more salespeople and grow at a much quicker rate than he was going to. So he came to me, and I spoke with the lender who pays the creditor, because when he raises an invoice to his client, he becomes their creditor. So what we were able to do, and this was a new product that had just come to the market, is on his invoices, we put a link to that lender to say, right, you need to pay that £100,000 up front. Now, most of us are not going to be able to do that. So he wasn't going to be able to win as much contracts as he was hoping to do. But if they click on that link, that will allow them to pay him immediately and spread their cost over 3, 6, 9, 12 months. So that type of funding allowed him to like really grow his business now, because the people who can't afford £100,000 up front and say, if I could spread that over 12 months, that's fine. And he could make the decision to take the cost of that, or just pass it on. He wanted the client to pass it on. So I thought that was quite a creative type of funding to help with expansion. I talked about asset finance for machinery, photocopiers, and bridging against your current assets and commercial mortgages. I think we've already gone on. So just to give you a scenario of acquisitions, of it growing through acquisitions, and this was a client of mine who had a landscaping business, and he was very good at what he does. A young, bright entrepreneur, had really understood the business, has a business coach, has a financial coach, to making sure that every part of the way he was managing, doing his financial health check, literally on a monthly basis. This guy does it. And he had a really good relationship with his clients as well. But he wanted, rather than expanding and getting double the amount of clients, he actually wanted to be able to offer other services to the existing base. And I talked earlier about if you do something good, do more of it, So his clients loved him. They loved that he came in and did the landscaping of their businesses, the external landscaping. So now, with all his acquisitions, we're about to do the next one, he's just adding on services. So the first one was Japanese knotweed, because he's around London and there's a lot of that around there. So he bought that business. Now, when he came to me, he said, I need 250,000 up front. Because if anybody's ever bought a business, you don't normally pay for the full business up front. You'll pay a percentage, maybe as little as you can get away with, really, but generally 40, 50, 60% up front, and then the rest as you go. So he needed 250 immediately, like within a week. But I also suggested that he look at a cash flow facility, because I've bought businesses before, and as soon as you start to put them together, your eyes off the ball, you're not selling as much as you normally were, and you're working on this massive integration of staff and services and processes and systems, and it generally knocks you, and within a few months your cash flow is hit. So I said to him, look, why don't we just get you a 50 grand facility, and have that there just in case, and help you to sleep money. So we did that, and actually, when he bought that business over, he was able to take the overheads, because the main overheads was the owner, and the owner was gone. So he literally, and he wasn't going to take any wages out of that business. So that business turned to a pure profit business, and he was able to pay that loan back in 3 months. So then he's moving on to looking at, I think the next one is going to be like a drainage business. So adding on, where you've done a good job with a client, adding on other services, generally is a very profitable way to increase your margin, because your overheads are going to stay the same. You just get more from those clients that love dealing with you. So that just gives you an idea of how to expand, but how somebody has done it really well, that really keeps an eye and constantly analyzes their financials. Okay, so just to go back over and reiterate before I see Jeff jumping back on there now. So what's your call to action as having this meeting today? I think is have a chat with your accountant. Some people use accountants, some people use there's a lot of what I call CFOs out there now, so rather than maybe using your accountant, somebody who's more a financial manager, and you don't have to have one of those in-house anymore. I used to years ago, but you don't, you can pay somebody half a day a month, or, for one meeting a month, or half a week to come into your business, and start looking at that cash flow, the profitability, managing the debt, financial planning for the future. And that financial planning for the future, I think, should also look at when you do start to become really profitable, is the taxable side of that. That's where that's the nice bit when you're earning so much money that you've got to start looking at more tax efficient ways of taking that money out of your business. So that's a nice place to be. And also the risks. What are those risks in your business? We talked about the liquidity and the financial stability of the business, and planning for that scaling up and growth of the business. Talk to me anytime about what lending options, so that you make sure you get the right one for that growth in the future. And I'm always here to talk and also I did mention that I hold a lot of events, and I'm holding an event about acquisitions. I'm also holding another event about EOTs, which is for people wanting to sell their business, their employee ownership trusts. And they're always free, so keep an eye on the Finance Hub website, and please book in and come and book yourself a meeting or come along. And Jeff, have we any questions? And thank you for your time. Thank you, Vicky. Thank you, Jeff.
Hello. No, I can't thank you enough, Gillian. That was amazing. Thank you. Really do appreciate it. Jeff is having mega problems today with his Zoom. Every time he seems to come into the webinar fully to speak, it throws him out.
Can you hear me, Vicky?
Yes, you're on now, so everyone can hear you.
Sorry about that. So yeah, I don't know what's happening, but I keep getting chucked out. So you won't be able to see me because that seems to be. But I think really just firstly a really big thank you to Gillian. So I watched the whole of the presentation. I thought it was a really kind of practical, really kind of open and honest discussion about finance, and I think finance can be it can be an area which is always a difficult one, because people can feel intimidated about not really understanding it, or that they don't necessarily feel that they're interested in it, because perhaps digital marketing is more exciting about it than anything else. But I thought it was brilliant. I really enjoyed it, actually, and I think any good presentation, it's really important to just take out a couple of key takeaways. And I think before we get onto the questions, and I think just to highlight to people, there is a Q&A sort of button where you can put Q&As up and do that. But I think I'll go through a few of those. So just the things for me, I think that point around cash is king, it is so clear, because as a business owner, if you're focused around cash, if that's what you're worrying about, then the thing is that you're then not thinking about, it's a little bit like driving a car, but you're worrying about, what's on the stereo, and you're not looking ahead for the direction of the business. And I think, as soon as people start to get into issues with cash flow, it affects all parts of the business, and it is the most stressful time. And I think lots of people that have run businesses have had cash flow issues. So Gillian certainly intimated to that. I've also been through businesses that have had cash flow issues, and it's just all absorbing, and it just takes you just end up taking your eye off the ball of that. So I think that's a really good thing. I think just in terms of the advice around not taking too much out of the business, easier said than done, but I think also just having those things in place. I think the second takeaway I had in there was really very much around how you identify issues early, and really kind of be thinking about that. And that's a little bit about that. It's about having everything in one place and structured out well. And Gillian talks about Xero, and I also agree. I think Xero is a fantastic system. We use it across all of the businesses that we're involved in, and I think that having that. But I think also having a really open and honest relationship with your accountant and your financial advisor, I think is an important one. And then the third one, and I'll then get maybe Gillian to just kind of comment back on this before I dive into some of the questions. Is around that ability to collect cash early, and I think that's all about customer relationships. And I think it really melds this idea of finance is not about kind of an Excel spreadsheet and typing numbers. It's very much about relationships, because if you've got good relationships with your customers, and you can talk to them about stuff, particularly as a small business, and you can get that early payment, that really helps you, because let me tell you, there are some customers out there that they do not pay on time. Customers out there where you might be contracted to pay on 15 or 30 days. And they just don't do that. And so those customers that pay on, that pay early, and if you've developed that relationships, they can be a real lifesaver to you. So I thought that was a really smart kind of point to raise on. So so Gillian, so I thought it was great. That there were the points for me. I don't know if you've got any final comments before we jump.
Yeah, I do actually, because you said those few. So firstly, you're absolutely right. People bury their head, and because I think there's a lot of people who are scared of the word finance or money. And certainly, and I realized this a few years ago when I was doing a loan for actually the people who do my design my branding and all of that. And I was doing a loan for them. And the owner of the business was like, running up and down, scared when I went to get her to sign the contract. And I was like, I couldn't understand this, because I love figures. I love, that is my bag. But I realized it's not everybody else's bag. Their bag is, they make branding. They're brilliant at making, brands and graphic design and, making things look pretty. But actually, when it comes to money, they were really, really scared of it. And one of the reasons I set up the Finance Hub, so Lender Made Simple has been going for nearly 10 years, but the Finance Hub is only 3 years. The motto of the Finance Hub is let's talk. And the reason I did it was I realized that people they're either scared of it, or they don't want to deal with it until they have to. And we've so many elements within that. As you said, you've got your accountant, you've got your financial advisor, and you might even have a mortgage broker as well. You may be looking in your business owner, and we all know you can't go to the high street as a business owner to get a mortgage. You need, an expert to help you with that. But they're all very disjointed. And that was the idea of the Finance Hub, is let's talk, come in and talk about it. We're not going to sell you a product. And that's what people are concerned. Oh God, they're going to sell me a pension. They're going to sell me this, or they're, going to give me the wrong advice because that's their product they sell. And I always say, I don't sell finance. If people come in, they need a loan, I'll tell them what I think I could get them or what's available, and do they think it's right for their business, and is it going to, can they go and put that back into their cash flow to make sure it's achievable? Because what I don't want to do is give them something that's going to send them over the edge. But it's about just standing up and talking about it, and don't bury the head. That's the worst thing. That's what I see with people. Like my clients say to me, Oh my God, I wish I'd have spoke to you 2 years ago. My business would have grown much quicker and easier because I now get it. Because I think I talk in layman's terms. I don't talk like a financer or a banker because I'm not. So yeah, talk about it. Don't. And one of the things, West Kent Mind is actually my charity in the Finance Hub, because I believe, some of the biggest issues with mental health and, business owners, they get into that cash flow problem. And it's, as you said, Jeff, as well, I've been there. I sold that photocopier business when I took it to a 7 million turnover with 42 staff. I sold it because of stress. I had a breakdown and I thought, this is going to kill me. And that was cash flow. So, we all have cash flow issues, and it's just a matter of don't bury the head, talk to somebody, bring it out in the open, and plan for it in advance. That's the biggest key. Um, Collecting the cash early. I actually think that we don't do. I think we can do more of that. I talked about, you've got really good clients that love you, want to do more business with you. But, I think if you're honest with them and say, look, I'm a small organization. I really want your business. I want to do more business with you. You're a much bigger organization. I'm now going to have to take on more staff and take on more costs, which I'm willing to do. But could I ask you to pay earlier? Because collections it's the biggest problem, and downfall in any business, that they're not collecting that money. Another thing I find with people signing up new contracts, sometimes people come to me to finance the signing of a new contract, and it just looks too good to be true. And they go, oh yeah, no, they're not going to pay me for 90 days, but I've got to take on 20 staff, and I'm thinking, why are you taking all the risk on this? Why have they come to you with this? Why are they not gone to your competitors that they were already with? So do think about that. If you win a big contract and your debtor is pushing on you for a 90-day payment terms, just think about why they're doing that, and make sure that you protect yourself and don't go under because of it.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is probably. I mean, it was a few years ago, but there was certainly a big furore about some of the supermarkets that were pushing payment terms out 90 days, 100 days, 120 days, and I think that culture has now changed a little bit. But there is absolutely still customers out like that, and I think the thing is you're absolutely right to be having that open discussion with your clients, to just talk to them, to say, look, if you're not getting paid for 90 days, that's a lot of risk that you're taking in terms of paying out all of the money that you've got to deliver your service, or to make and then ship your products. And then and then you might not even get paid at the end of the 90 days. There may even be delays, or you may have problems, or so. I think that's really relevant, actually. So
Yeah. And I said earlier that the way we do business has changed. So I'll give you a scenario. One of my clients many, many years ago used to sell torches and things like that into Tesco and B&Q and all of these. They would get an order up front. So let's say they got an order from Tesco for £200,000. The lender would lend them trade finance to buy, let's say it was £120,000 worth of stock from China. When it hit the UK, the invoice was raised, and the lender would then turn that into invoice financing. So the whole cycle of that order was financed by the bank. So it was quite easy to grow a business. That doesn't happen anymore. I've loads of suppliers now that supply widgets into B&Q and Tesco and all that. What they'll say to them now is, yeah, if you've got the stock, we'll buy it off you and we'll pay you in 60 days. So that person then has to fund it for the 3 months to get it here, then has to put it into B&Q or Tesco's, and then doesn't get paid until Tesco's has probably sold it anyhow. So the way we've done business has completely changed, and that's what I love about the alternative funding world, is starting to become very creative to help us to fund these different types of transactions that we now have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I think that is really right, actually. So Great. Okay. So before I jump into a couple of questions, and just to encourage participants that are on, so a couple of things that we've got is that you will have been sent out some polls. These questions are feedback that we get so that we can then feed that into the Growth Hub to look at how we can do more events and different events. And we've also sent out a link to our feedback questionnaire. So we're really keen to hear from you about your experience. We really want to hear from you about any other areas that you'd like to see events. That's a really important part of this. And you know, and I think that we design the program of events based on feedback. So please do that. Please also note that we have got a program of other events that are happening through until the end of March as part of Accelerate. There is a link to the program of events which takes you through to Eventbrite. So my suggestion would be, as a really good action, would be to follow the Kent and Medway Growth Hub Eventbrite channel, and then you'll get notified of any events that are coming up in the future. And we've got some events focused around also around finance. We've got some events focused around sales and also around marketing as well. So there's a really nice broad program of events that are happening. There are some physical events that we've got coming up, and there's also some more virtual ones. So you'll be able to see that everything is in there. You can register for the events. They are all free, all funded by the Kent and Medway Growth Hub, and just a really fantastic broad spectrum with you know, speakers of a similar caliber to Gillian. So it's a good chance to hear from them. Most of them are actually also business owners based in the Kent area. So we're kind of, you know, looking to also just share our local talent. So just jumping into the questions. So yeah, if any of the participants would like to raise a question, please put it into the Q&A now so that you can see that. So a couple of questions that we've got in there. So just thinking about a high street business, and thinking about particularly you know, somebody in the service industry, so like a hair salon, or maybe you know, a beauty salon or something like that. There has been a bit of a challenge where there has been rising costs for businesses, but because of the cost of living crisis that is being faced by consumers out there, the ability for people to be able to raise their prices may not necessarily be there, or certainly they might be nervous about raising their prices. What would your advice be to a business owner in terms of just thinking about rising costs versus revenue that is either stabilizing or dropping? You know, what are the sorts of things would you be able to be thinking about that, Gillian?
We'll say that rising cost versus.
So you've got rising costs as a business versus the fact that your revenue or your sales is staying constant, because either your you know, business is staying the same and you're not able to increase your cost, your sales price. Alternatively, perhaps if it's a beauty salon and then people are not necessarily visiting the beauty salon as much because cost of living crisis, that's reducing sales. What sort of advice would you be giving to a business owner just in terms of that, from a finance perspective?
Yeah, I mean, if there's no way of looking at the costs and shaving off some of the costs, and going back to what I said earlier, I'm probably the bigger risk taker, and the more positive looking is how you can increase. How can you increase that income? Can you be more creative? To, you know, whether that's kind of giving your clients a loyalty discount or something. So one, they're loyal, but they bring in their mates. You know, so maybe if there's nothing that you can shave off the cost side of it, is to try grow the business, because your costs will stay the same. You know, we talked earlier about the margin. So looking at maybe being a bit creative, being a bit different to your competitors around taking that loyal base you already have and asking them to help you grow, by bringing in more business. So rather than increasing theirs, maybe giving them a bit of a discount in order to increase the turnover.
Okay. Yep. No. I think that's really clear. So we've got another question. So that's come through to me. So it's a tech startup. Doesn't specify what the tech startup is, but is looking for funding to scale. What are the options available for businesses like mine, and and what are the steps that the entrepreneur needs to think about to go through in terms of financing that? So I don't have any details of what the tech startup.
No, but did you say textiles?
Tech startup.
Oh, tech startup. All right. Yeah. Okay.
So high growth business, and is looking for funding to scale up. What the sort of options? What are the things that they need to be thinking about in terms of perhaps what information they need to gather to sort of demonstrate the opportunity?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I get a lot of tech startups coming to me, and when people say startup, that can mean anything from sitting in your living room thinking about it to sometimes people call themselves a tech startup, and they're already 1 million or 2 million turnover. So it really depends on where they are. If somebody came to me at the very early stages, I would say talk to your guys about a startup loan, grants, any support they can get on that side, which is obviously not my bag. That's what you guys do. If they're a little bit further down line, and they now have a revenue, because sometimes startup can be pre-revenue for a very long time. If it is pre-revenue and it has the ability for a much bigger growth, obviously something like private equity, VCs. Now, again, it's not something I do, but I have a lot of connections in that world. And I do, because they can go to companies who lend using EIS and SEIS scheme, which you may have heard of, which is effectively a tax efficient scheme for investors. So if they go to like a capital company who invest for equity in their business using this scheme, the person who invests it can claim 50% of it back straight away on their taxes. So they generally will take a chance on it. So as I said, I do have some connections in that world. But if they sit in the middle, which is where I sit, there's lots of different ones. Like I did a SaaS platform. I'm not sure if everybody knows what a SaaS platform is. Effectively, where you sell a service, in bundles or and this company came to me. They had created a legal platform for contracts, and they were selling into businesses. So when a business gets a contract in, a legal contract, they can run it through this AI tech platform, and it can tell them where there may be issues in it. But they wanted to move it to America. They wanted to grow the technology, but they wanted to hive that business off and leave it because it was in a specific sector, and now they want to offer it to every sector. So it wasn't tech startup, it was pre-revenue. And they came to me, and I actually got them 500,000 within a couple of weeks, and we're just increasing it to 750 this week of a revolving cash flow. Now, we did take a charge on a property, but no other finance company would finance it because it was pre-revenue. But because I was able to paint the picture that, look, they've done this before in a different format, I was able to convince the funder, but they did have an asset to charge against, so you won't get that type of money on lending without having something to guarantee the lender on. But that was an AI tech platform, and the owner actually said to me that I helped them move that business 2 years quicker than it was going to. Now, in a lightning fast world like AI, moving 2 years quicker was phenomenal. And then there's other, I mentioned earlier about there are some kind of lenders that will give lines of credit. So there may be, as I always say, with what I do, there may be many ways to skin a cat. That, you know, I'm a very outside the box thinker, so I don't just do the traditional, you know, so there could be many ways, and I'll be more than happy to take that offline and have a chat with them. And if I can't help, point them in the direction of where is best to go. I had another tech company actually who was building another platform, and they had done one before in a different industry, so they had a bit of history on it. So they wanted to get it as far down the line before they took some equity investment, because that brought the valuation of the business up. So they were going to, in fact, by the time they took private equity funding, they were already worth 4 million. Now I got them a few loans along the way. I got them a business loan. I got them a revolving cash flow. I mean, they literally kept pushing me until I could get as much funding for them, so they could just keep growing that technology until the value of it got to the next level, and then they were going out to take it like really big. So there's lots of different angles at different stages of the growth of a tech, or of any kind of new technology, but in the IT sector as well, in the tech sector.
Perfect. Okay, so I think definitely the takeaways from that are anyone interested in in finding out a bit more, please get in contact with Gillian, and and I'm sure that you certainly, if it's find Gillian on LinkedIn or just drop an email straight.
Yeah, just go on the financehub.money.
Financehub.money, and I'm assuming that you're on all of the relevant socials as well.
Yeah. If you follow me, you'd be bored looking at me probably.
Good. Well, that's it. So I think that's it. And it sounds like then that, assuming that we're not talking about somebody that is kind of thinking, it's just really at the idea phase. We're talking, there's the very established businesses that have got the ability to provide security to a finance, to financing, which so therefore that sounds like the more typical loans. Or alternatively, if it's more of the venture capital or seed funding,
yeah,
that's very much more about about some of the venture capital companies, where they're effectively kind of investing money for equity and taking a bet on the company.
Tech plays, that the tech world is very investable. That there's a lot of appetite out there at the moment.
And so what might be also helpful, because I know that lots of people know about this or have heard about this, but I don't know if you can just outline a bit more about it. So there's various organisations out there that will offer sort of crowdfunding or that sort of thing. Like, so Crowdcube is one of them, where you can put your business on and then people can choose to invest in it. Can you explain a bit about what those platforms are, and and just what it is that where does the money come from, and so forth?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of those platforms is kind of anybody can invest in them, and my understanding of the likes of Crowdcube, it's a lot about you promoting it. You've got to really, they'll host it. You go out there and you really promote it and bring, and they'll have their own investors, but that's anybody. Anybody can go on there and buy a share, and when you set up your company on there, you decide how small. It could be £10, it could be the minimum's £100, it could be £1,000, it could be but I know from people that have done it, there's a lot of work goes into you having to promote it yourself, as opposed to they promote it. It's more them hosting it.
Got it. Okay, so effectively, all of the work in terms of building up the slide decks to show the current business situation, what the opportunity is, what the potential for growth is, the profitability, that sits with you. But also, you need to market it out to a potential investor base. They'll have some investors, but you need to go out and get that. Okay, so it's very much a platform. So probably for those opportunities to be successful, you've got to already have a base of people that are interested in investing in your business.
Yeah, or you've got to be probably very good on things like social media where you're out
Yeah.
there pushing it out to get the investors in. The other type, which is the private equity or VC, is generally, yeah, you get your pitch deck, and there's lots of specialists out there can help you with that sort of stuff ready, and you go in front of them, and they're generally private investors, that have been brought in. Like I work with one company, and they will help you get ready, and then they've got the basic investors. They've already set up you'll have to set up your EI and SEIS scheme, which you can do yourself, or you get a lawyer to help you. I know some people say, "Oh, it's really easy, I can do it myself," but some people need help with that. You set it up because the government has to approve it, and once you're set up on it, they will invest in it, obviously, so they can get their SEIS certificate from you and claim their 50% back in tax. And they will normally, or there are specialists that will help you kind of do the valuation of that business as well, and what are the shares worth and what are they getting for it, So there's lots goes into the mechanism behind it, but they're generally private investors.
Got it. Okay, so the SEIS scheme is in essence, you get a sign off or certification from the government to say my business is at such an early stage that by investing in the business, you then, the investors then get a tax break, and that makes it very attractive for them.
Yeah,
So yeah,
and it's to encourage growth. I think it's a great thing, because people who are paying high ends of tax, have probably made their money because they're entrepreneurs. They're keen to look at young new businesses, and they want to invest in them, and they've got a massive big tax bill, and they're going to get 50% of it back. So I meet with quite a lot of these people, because I'm part of a company of entrepreneurs. And it always mesmerized me. Well, you lost money, like what percentage actually make it through? And oh, maybe 20%. But actually, if you think of it, the risk is not, if they're going to get 50% of their tax back, so they've got 50% to lose, and if maybe 20% of those companies make it, then they can possibly make it very big and make a big return, but then they can also lose it.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So I think that's really clear, and I think certainly for somebody that's thinking about about investment, then that's a consideration, because there's obviously requirements, and there's obviously things that you need to do to be able to achieve it. But you effectively take out a huge amount of risk for the investors, and so therefore that makes the investment more attractive. So I think that's good.
And
Great.
I'm as I said, even though I don't do that, I do have a lot of connections, and I'm happy to have a chat with people to see if I can help, and if I can't, I'll point them in the direction of who can.
That's great. No, thank you for that, Gillian. So yeah, absolutely. So I think we've come to the end of the workshop. There's probably more questions here, but we are going to offer anyone who wants to join in on a separate Zoom. So it will be a Zoom meeting as opposed to webinar, and that's where you can kind of have a one-to-many mentoring session with Gillian. So we've put the Zoom ID up. So if you'd like to then jump into to that meeting, then what I suggest is that we will probably be ready to go on that meeting in about 5 minutes or so, to give people time to jump across to the meeting, and perhaps also have a quick pit stop and get themselves ready. Just a final very big thank you to Gillian. That was a really good session, really practical, really interesting, covered lots of different areas, and so I think that was great. And then finally, just to say a big thank you to all of our participants. Please follow us on the Eventbrite, and you'll pick up some all of the events that we're doing now through until the start of April, when Accelerate finishes. So we are looking forward to seeing you all. The Zoom ID is down there, so if you want to just take a screenshot of that, and then you can jump into the Zoom meeting. Gillian and Vicky from the Growth Hub will be will be on there to answer any questions and talk through stuff. And other than that, just a very big thank you, and we will look forward to seeing you at the next event.
Thank you.